Never assume that the people who share your blood actually have your back. I learned that the hard way at my parents' 40-year anniversary party, standing in a room full of expensive champagne and even more expensive lies. My mother looked my 12-year-old daughter, Maddie, straight in the eyes and told a room of 50 people that some children are just born to be background characters. She didn't know I was holding a secret that was about to turn their perfect celebration into the most humiliating night of their lives. If you think your family is toxic, wait until you hear what my parents did to their own granddaughter just because she reads a little differently than everyone else. I remember sitting in the car before we walked into the country club, watching Maddie fiddle with the hem of her dress. She's 12, that age where you're half child and half something else, trying to find your footing. Maddie is brilliant, but her brain works like a complex puzzle that takes a second longer to click into place. She has dyslexia. To my parents, that made her broken. To them, if you couldn't read a menu without mixing up the letters, you weren't worth the air you breathed. I squeezed her hand and told her she looked beautiful. I told her we'd stay for 2 hours, eat the cake, and leave. I should have known my mother, Eleanor, had a different plan. The moment we walked in, the air felt thin. My sister, Sarah, was already there with her daughter, Chloe. Chloe is what my parents call the gold standard. She's a straight-A student, a tennis player, and she speaks 3 languages. My parents treat her like a literal goddess, while Maddie is usually relegated to the kids' table in the corner, even when there are no other kids there. The party was in full swing, and the ego in the room was suffocating. My father was holding a glass of scotch that probably cost more than my first car, bragging to his business associates about the family legacy. I tried to keep Maddie close, but my mother swooped in, dressed in silver silk that made her look like a cold statue. She didn't hug Maddie. She didn't even look at her. She just looked at me and said, "I hope you coached her on her manners, Annalise. We have important people here, and we don't need any outbursts or confusion." I felt my blood start to simmer. Maddie isn't loud or disruptive. She's just quiet because she's tired of being judged. I told my mother that Maddie was fine and that she should focus on being a hostess instead of a critic. But the night was just getting started. As the dinner began, my parents took to the small stage at the front of the ballroom. They wanted to make a speech about their 40 years together, but it quickly turned into a public ranking of their grandchildren. My father started talking about the future of the family. He called Chloe up to the stage. He talked for 5 minutes about her grades, her backhand, and her bright future at an Ivy League school. The crowd cheered. Then the tone shifted. My mother took the microphone. She looked toward our table, but her eyes landed on Maddie with a look of pure pity. "And then there's Maddie," she said, her voice echoing through the speakers. We love all our family, of course. But we have to be realistic. Some are leaders and some are followers. Some struggle just to get through a basic day. That's why tonight, we're announcing the establishment of the Legacy Trust. It's a fund for Chloe's education and future business ventures. As for Maddie, we've set aside a small, protected stipend for her special needs and basic care, because we know she won't be able to provide the same prestige to this family name. The room went silent. I could feel Maddie's hand shaking under the table. My daughter, my brave, creative, genius daughter, was being branded as the dumb one in front of everyone we knew. My mother actually called her a background character to the people who were supposed to be her peers. I looked at Maddie, and I saw a tear roll down her cheek. That was it. That was the moment the good daughter in me died. I didn't care about the inheritance. I didn't care about the scene. I stood up, and the sound of my chair scraping against the hardwood floor sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. My mother looked at me, annoyed that I was interrupting her moment. "Annalise, sit down. We aren't finished," she snapped. I didn't sit down. I walked toward the stage. I could see my sister Sarah smirking, probably already spending Chloe's portion of the money in her head. But I wasn't there to beg for money. I was there to burn their narrow-minded world to the ground. I reached the stage and took the microphone right out of my mother's hand. She looked shocked, her mouth hanging open like a landed fish. I looked out at the guests, the important people my parents were so desperate to impress, and I started to speak. Before I get to the part where I silence that entire room, I want to know if you've ever had to stand up to someone who should have loved you unconditionally. If you're enjoying this story of justice, please hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and comment down below where you're watching from. I'd love to know where our community is growing. I stood on that stage and looked my father in the eye. "You talk about legacy like it's something you can buy with a trust fund," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "And you talk about Maddie like she's a burden. You've spent 12 years ignoring her because she doesn't fit into your little box of what a successful person looks like. You think her dyslexia makes her slow? You think she's a background character? Well, let me update you on the background character you just insulted." The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and opened the email I had received that morning, the one I hadn't even told Maddie about yet because I wanted to surprise her in private. But private time was over. "You mentioned Chloe's grades," I continued, looking at my sister. "That's great. But while you were busy hiring tutors to make sure Chloe could memorize textbooks, Maddie was in her room creating. 2 months ago, Maddie entered the National Youth Science Competition. She didn't tell you because she knew you'd laugh. Well, she didn't just enter. She placed in the top 3 in the entire country for her environmental filtration project. A project that is currently being reviewed by a real-world NGO for implementation in developing areas. She's 12, and she's already solving problems you don't even understand." I saw my father's face turn a weird shade of gray. But I wasn't done. "And since you love prestige so much, maybe you'll appreciate this. Maddie doesn't just struggle with words. She masters them in ways you can't imagine. She has had 3 poems published in national literary magazines this year under a pen name. She sees the world in metaphors while you see it in bank statements." The guests were starting to whisper, but it wasn't the pitying whisper from before. It was genuine shock. I looked back at my mother, who was trying to grab the microphone back. I stepped away from her. "But here's the kicker," I said, raising my voice. "The dumb one you just publicly humiliated? She just got her acceptance letter this morning. She's been invited to the MIT summer program for gifted young scientists. It's one of the most prestigious invitations a student in this country can get. They don't care that she flips her B's and D's. They care that her brain sees solutions that normal people miss. So, keep your trust fund. Keep your legacy fund for Chloe. Maddie doesn't need your money to build a future because she's already building one that is far bigger than this small, judgmental room." I walked off the stage and went straight to Maddie. She was standing up now, her eyes wide, a mix of shock and pure, unadulterated pride on her face. I didn't look back at my parents. I didn't look at the important guests. We walked out of that country club with our heads held high. The silence I left behind was the loudest thing I've ever heard. My parents tried to call me for weeks afterward. They sent emails saying they didn't realize and that they wanted to adjust the trust. I blocked them. I realized that night that you can't fix people who see children as status symbols instead of human beings. Maddie went to that MIT program. She thrived. She met other kids who think just like she does, kids who see the world in 3D and colors instead of just black and white text. She learned that her dyslexia isn't a disability, it's a different operating system. My parents lost a granddaughter that night, and they lost the only person in the family who was actually doing something world-changing. They're still stuck in their country club, bragging about legacy, while the real legacy is out there changing the world without them. Different doesn't mean dumb. It never has. It just means the world hasn't caught up to you yet. If you have someone in your life who makes you feel small, remember that their opinion is a reflection of their limits, not yours. If this story made your chest tighten, if it reminded you of a time you had to protect someone you love, or wish someone had protected you, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss stories that expose toxic family dynamics and celebrate quiet brilliance that the world tries to ignore. Hit like to help this story reach someone who needs to hear it today, and share it with a parent, a teacher, or anyone raising a child who's been labeled different. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to stand up for someone everyone else underestimated? Your voice matters here.